I'm going to jump into the first part, which is really about data and how that really applies to a mixed use project. All right, so this is something from the real estate studio. So, like any real estate project or a design project, you would end up having some kind of a visual where you're presenting a vision, you're presenting an imagination. And that is, of course, so the first two parts are what we are familiar with typically as designers. So when you talk about the context, of course, you'll try to say, okay, what's the relevance of it? So in our case, this was the site. Now, I'm not talking about this from like discussing an architecture project. I'm going to go over it pretty fast. So to give an idea, of course, we'd like to talk about, okay, what are we really imagining this as? What is this place going to be? What does it do as a connector? What is its, nature of use? What is its past? What is its context? What is its future? And who are the people who are going to inhabit this? Who am I designing for? And so like any typical design project, you would say, well, this is the context, this is what it used to be. These are the people, for example, here it's an artist community. These are the people who occupy this area now. So there's this human context. There is a built environment context, which is basically old brick industrial buildings. And then you try and locate it. And of course, as you're creating a new imagination, saying there are artists, and Boston is a center of tech and innovation. You talk about, art districts and those kind of references. You throw in some references of, tech centers like Kendall Square. And then you want to talk about, okay, who are the people who are going to come here? It could include, architecture students from MIT or Harvard who are just, up on the train line. It could be a CEO from one of the companies here. It could be an artist who's living there for the past 40 years. It could be this young 5-year-old who likes to ride a bicycle around the museum square. And this is something you're fairly familiar with, but you'd probably want to take a step back here before you jump to the next spot. And this is where the role of data, at least where in contexts like the US, where it is available from big providers like RCA, Real Capital Analytics, Comstack, things like that. So the precursor to this kind of work really is a lot of detailed analysis on the market. And by market, you typically want to understand two things. Forgive me if this is jargon to many of you, but you'll talk about value drivers and demand drivers. So value drivers are things that are going to contribute to your revenues, things that will help you sell, things that will help the product become, commercially successful. The value drivers, for example, there's a park in front of your site. You'll say, oh, if I create a building and I provide balconies there, the apartments will command a premium price, because it's park view or seaside view. And that's a value driver. Whereas there are demand drivers. Demand drivers will be, well, there is a huge millennial population here. They only like, small 1-bedroom studios, and they don't like kitchens too much. They'd rather spend time in a bar. So you'd actually create a bar and a gym and those kind of facilities in your apartment complex rather than making the apartments very big, so what is really driving demand and which products. So, well, this is something, for example, this is something we did as group work. Our team was Sarah, me, Sebastian, and Katie. A mix of, someone from the business school, someone from finance, me who's between real estate and design and planning. So yeah, jumping straight in. So this is how you'd structure. You try to understand your population, what's driving employment, what the property or the real estate market is, what the transportation linkages are. This is something that drives demand. And then of course, some case studies on what's happening around in the context. Then you try and understand what the pipeline is, what kind of real estate products are coming on, what kind of schemes are coming on, in what kind of timeline, how are they doing, what trends are. And then you finally say, okay, this is what we should build. Now, all of this is feeding into, that design decision. Before I make my first sketch and diagram, I've probably gone through at least 2 weeks, 3 weeks of this kind of research. So, simple thing, Boston, I mean, for a US city, it's crazy, 17% of a population growth since the 1990s. Employment, also very massive growth. And again, GDP is growing. And then, of course, you have these data points about, where this is happening, where those property listings are. Simple thing, so you see millennial population, right? You compare that to other cities. So people think, well, San Francisco is the tech hub. Interestingly enough, Boston has a higher percentage of millennials in their population than San Francisco. So the product you design suddenly has to consider that. And you also see this heat map about where they're concentrated. And you see it's pretty much the city center, not so much the suburbs. So depending on where your site is, you would take that into account. You'll try and also understand employment cycles, based on the years, what the current trend in the market is. You'll try and understand which sectors are doing well. For example, construction and utilities, 20%, businesses, service industries are almost 17%. Government is reasonably small. Education, health is massive. I mean, no surprise, huge, there are at least 4 or 5 major universities and tons of smaller colleges in Boston. And we also know who are the big tenants coming in, Amazon, and the kind of square footages they are absorbing, so Amazon, WeWork, I mean, this is of course before the debacle, but all of these coming on. You'll also see, okay, what are really the kind of skills that are abundant in Boston and which ones are scarce. So, for example, medical healthcare is pretty big in Boston, Harvard Medical, MGH, all of those things. And based on that, you say, okay, these are the kind of people companies will be desperate to attract. This is something that if you're building something new, you want to kind of write it into your analyses. I'll skip over some of these detailed analysis. Another thing you see, there's Harvard, there's MIT. Most people who are related to the institutions, which is almost a population of 100,000, are linked on the red line. So effectively, if your site is there, they're all coming in like that. Airport is 7 minutes from the site. The Seaport District proper is 5 minutes. The Financial District is 15 minutes. And then, of course, so you jump in and you look at these this is data from CompStack. So, you get data like which quarter, which year the property was built, classification in terms of office, address, size of square, transaction size, the rate at which the rent started, net effective rent, the lease term. Suppose sometimes rents increase every year. Sometimes you have to invest upfront before you can rent it. So there's an average, like a net effective because of this work value. You also know, so there's a 10-year lock-in, right? You also know who the tenant is, So for example, some of these big tenants, Accenture, for example, is a big tenant, 10-year lease, okay, that's going to attract more. So all these things you bake in. So while this is for a certain area, you'll also do a, typology analysis of what worked, how it did, who are the tenants, how much they rented, what's the typical flow plate. So there's a design and financial understanding, a product understanding. So you do that for most of your competitor districts. The financial district is next door. You do some analysis. You'll analyze vacancy rates, which basically means what percentage of properties, haven't been rented out. That if suppose vacancy is very high, market is slow. Vacancy is very low in a neighboring similar land use type. There's a market for it. Like if finance sector is doing very well and vacancy is very, very low, if you build financial towers, they're going to do well. So anyway, this is the tons of data that we have. We can use sophisticated Excel models. We can use an R model, write more complex scripts. So this is all the competitor districts, typologies. So I'm just going to skim over. This is certain repurposing of structures. Like this was an old building in the Navy area. This is another very old Navy, loading area, old building again, where you kind of are seeing, restructuring, the size of offices that are getting populated, what class of offices. And so, you kind of put all that together. You understand supply and demand. You understand who are the big players who are coming in next to you, like Amazon, big innovation players, current repurposing projects on the way. WeWork, was a big phenomenon. And then you'll probably, take away certain suggestions, like, build big ground floor plates, like 35 to 40,000 square feet plates, because R&D and labs will really take it up. You can actually stock it, kind of, stack it up further. And as you go taller, you can go with smaller modules of 20 to 25,000 square feet, where office tenants like Accenture and consulting and tech can take it up. Also, vintage Class Bs are again a very hot thing in this area. And because rents are lower, a lot of startups might want to take it up. So that's kind of what helps you get a product mix. What's called a product mix is what land use, what type. So diving straight into, what we did. And again, I'm going to be very quick on this. I'm going to be conscious to limit this to about 15 minutes. So where we left off, how do I really start with this design program? Of course, now I have to take all these analysis and understanding and place it on site. So of course, we have some vision of, okay, this is a massive site. We are talking about some kind of a connector, bridge to the current public transport zone. There's a convention center. We're talking about imagination of public space. Uh, so how we get to that, if this is really the vision you're selling with, you're saying there's a museum, there's a waterfront, there are people canoeing, there is a plaza, there are these typical conventional, glitzy looking office towers. I mean, I don't necessarily recommend this kind of architecture, but this is an impression of what the built environment or the financial markets would kind of result in. You also talk about the imagination of what this elevated walkway, at a third or fourth floor level, because you're building larger floor plates on the ground, narrower on the top. You imagine, okay, the roofs of these thicker floor plates will have some public space that, you have kids cycling around, there's a bar, people are coming out from an office space, they are hanging around here in the evening before they walk home. So just to go back to this diagram, that's the imagination of the elevated roadscape. Again, this is a block level urban design diagram. So again, in sections, extremely schematic. You talk about plazas at multiple levels, directly from buildings, people descending onto these. Of course, you give references for what this imagined space could be. And then, of course, you plonk it on the site. You say, well, these plot sizes are too big. It's not easy to sell or lease these sizes. The urban design grid is not working with the context. Because, if you try and sell to a bigger land parcel or lease to a bigger land parcel, you might not have any buyers for that price point. Right? So you kind of cut it up. You try and see what's the average walking distance, driving distance. So effectively, that's what you end up with. You say, okay, that is a primary walking axis. You'll say, I want to create nodes at every intersection, convert those nodes into public plazas and green spaces at elevated levels, have secondary transportation. You leave the cars in the lower floors and the basements. You also have to cater to the flood risk in the Seaport District, because Boston is very flood prone. So, you don't want people to activate the ground. The ground is a long-term future use. And of course, you come up with a very rather strange mixed use kind of thing, where you have industrial, you have retail, you have commercial, everything happening in pretty much the same kind of space. Again, you move to a second floor, first floor level in the US, an upper level, you see a lot of green, you see a lot of yellow, which is residential, coming down onto the plazas. You see a lot of commercial opening up into plazas, retail, waterfront activation. So again, this is like driving into what we did. Well, this is not so much of a design discussion. What is interesting is you come up with this kind of a land use or rather product allocation, where you see 27% is office and 9% is retail, which includes, shops, restaurants, shopping areas. You have almost 5% which is hotel. You have like 16%, which is, R&D labs, medical research facilities and things like that. And another 10%, which is industrial. Looking at almost 65% of this neighborhood is effectively meant for business. And why you would do that? And so you see residential is very low, which is almost like 9%, and of which, of course, you have to satisfy minimum affordable housing requirements, which are like 5% of total build up. For example, I think in Boston, you need to allocate 13% of total residential build towards affordable. So yeah, that's what it translates to. And of course, you would end up with some calculations and your FAR and all those typical things. But the understanding here is that people don't necessarily have to live here. Also, your strategy has to be, if you try and sell housing in the beginning, it will sell at a lower price. If you build it up as a very premium retail, live, work, play neighborhood, people will come in from other parts of the city using the train line and then actually, spend time here, spend money here. And over the years, the land value and of the area will go up. And then when you try and build housing at a later stage, you can sell it for higher. So that's, I know some of you don't appreciate capitalism. We kind of have your eyebrows. Anyway, so of course, you have a very complex program because you have multiple entrances, multiple points of access. You see how the section is working. So implementation becomes super critical. So you see now such a large project, which is several million square feet, has to be built in one go. You start with where is value going to derive from. So at the same time, you're trying to make the public pretty happy, with all of this. Sorry. Yeah, so coming back to this, so saying that corner I generate a lot of revenue. This now, if I'm generating too much revenue, see the city is also a partner in this because I'm leasing part of the land from the mass port. So you have to give something back to the city, and that's why you say I'll also build a museum in the first phase. So it's like the city, the politician, the public is also kind of placated that, well, this developer is not that evil person. The At the same time, I mean, this is a political risk, from an investor perspective. At the same time, as a very altruistic designer, you would say, well, if I'm building something, I want to also activate public transport, activate an urban edge, a water edge, and hence I do both of these things at the same time. So I generate money here and I pump some of it here. So basically, to set up timelines, and you're looking at IRRs. I'm not going to zoom in, but you're looking at how much of return on investment you're getting at every phase of the project, because the money you get in this phase feeds the next phase of the project. Otherwise, because these projects take about 10 to 15 years, and you might see governments change 3 times, you might see financial markets crash and rise. So you have to kind of be in a closed loop, because investors typically have 5 to 7 year exit horizon. So like you see, then the second phase does something else, and you see these land uses keep changing, stacking. So of course, in the last phase comes the housing, just stacked over and right in the middle of. So I do not want to get too much into a design discussion on this. The purpose of this exercise was just to kind of explain to you how data kind of drives and market kind of understanding drives a certain urban design scheme. This is effectively how industrial comes in the end, lowest value, last to populate. So when I presented this, my committee, my jury would have 3 investment bankers, it will have 2 city officials, it will have 2 or 3 urban designers, it will have political representatives. So, and then of course different people want to look at different things. The investment bankers are more interested in stuff like this. They want to look at unlevered yields, for those of you who understand finance, because levered, so these are the margins that become important. LTVs, loan to value ratios, those become important. So without delving too deep into this, this is where you kind of give these high level figures, and then if an investor is interested, you would want to kind of dig into details of these kind of sheets. So I'll stop at this for questions on this segment before I try and say, well, this is all too US focused. There's so much of data. India is such a different market. How do we deal with India? It's a different story. What translates? It deserves, a conversation which we'll have in the next part, the next 40 minutes. But yeah, up for questions now. Aman, can feel free to moderate.
Yeah, so we can take some questions if there are any right now, or we can also take questions directly towards the end of it. Is there anything specific to this? If anybody wants to ask, we have Medha. Yeah, Medha, you can go ahead. I think.
Hi, Aman.
Hello. Hi.
Hello. Am I?
Yeah.
Hi. So I am a fresher from Bombay. Right now I'm in my hometown, that is Calcutta. So I have a question for Rushil, which I wasn't very clear about. So this entire thing that he had been talking about, the finance, economics, and the design and the urban data. So which has the first take, like as we design as a designer, or is it like which governs the entire thing? It's the finance, is the economics of the entire thing, or it's like the designers say as in what is needed in the built environment? So I would like to know that. What drives the project forward?
I think that is a very, very important question. It is, unfortunately, there is no straight answer to it. I think anyone who's been involved in a complex urban project like that will see that there is usually one stakeholder that leads and drives it, and other stakeholders are usually subsidiary or secondary. For example, I can talk about that because I played a large part in the design of that building. And so, for example, we had a massive, TEDx, TED Talk kind of an auditorium in the basement, and which we felt was very critical to this place as being a nerve center for startups in the zone. But suddenly said this was too expensive, and maybe it was eventually shelved. It kind of got thrown out of the project. So the program was kind of thought about from one perspective, from designer's point of view, and then of course the government had another point of view. But perhaps, there must have been some government engineers or policy advisors who might have even at that point felt it's necessary. But then at that point, effectively the person who's putting in the money or the political backing decides what is this project about? Should I cut down the entire project, or should I just go ahead with that? You contrast that with a developer-led project. Even if you see, if you talk about affordable housing, for example, so government will, for example, say, yes, we want to do this on a public-private partnership. Typically the AHP kind of projects, which is affordable housing partnership. It'll say, we've got these 200, informal dwellers. We need to resettle them, or give them something. This happens a lot in Bombay, obviously. And but at the same time, the government has no money to give, so it will say who's the highest bidder. You have to resettle these people on the same land, plus you have to give us a certain number of other things. And so now the government is, of course, pretty much, it's at the mercy of what the market gives. Suppose the market is in a bad shape, all the bids that will come in may not be very high, and then the government at that point needs to take a call. Are we in a position, or is this the best time to go ahead with this project because we're getting a bad deal? We could have got 500 houses for free from the developer, but currently the highest bid we are getting is for 300 houses. In that case, as an architect, of course, you will come up with very efficient ways to go about it. You will talk about, we can squeeze things, we can squeeze services, you know, all of that, but there's a limit to how much you can control. At the end of the day, the government takes the call again, even though it is at the mercy of the financiers. If it's a real estate project, of course, the builder will tell you budget nahi hai. Suppose tell you another scenario. You as an architect is doing affordable housing for a builder on a government contract, and the builder says, well, I've taken a loan of 100 crores and I'm paying 20% interest for it per year. So if I finish this project in 2 years, this is my cost. If I finish this project in 1 year and 3 months, this is my cost. I saved so much on interest. If you take 20% of 100 crores, you'll say, okay, that's 20 crores per year, and 1 year less I have to pay interest. I'm saving on 20 crores. In that case, the developer will say, can you mass produce this? So you'll say, okay, let's create pharmas. Let's give it to 10 different factories, ferrocement factories, who will assemble panels, and we'll use cranes and assemble it all in one go. So at that point, the developer will say, oh, I've saved so much money, and that allowed me to qualify for this kind of a project because I could quote so low. But as an architect, you'll say that is terrible from a living point of view, because ferrocement, or let's say, it's carcinogenic to the dwellers, or you say it generates a lot of heat. It does not give enough flexibility to the user. So all of these are equally valid, right? So if you're an ideal government public policy wonk, you will say, let me do a cost benefit analysis. Let me quantify cost to public health. Let me quantify cost to mental health. Let me quantify all of these things. But then at the end of the day, who decides? And the answer to that, like you're asking, comes back to who's in control of the project and who has most to lose from it. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer, but I thought I could be a little comprehensive.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think we can take one more question and then head to the next part. Is there any other question? I think there's Tarjini. Somebody has some questions she's written on the chat. Tarjini, could you ask it directly to Rushil?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. My doubt that I had just put on chat was that, it's the same trend right now with the big data, that it is actually serving the ones who are in control more than at grassroots level also. So even though internet seems like a very much democratic space, but we are seeing that sliding down. It seems like the same explanation to me right now over here, because the data is all the analysis was more towards how it would become a valuable land parcel more than how it would enrich the community life over there.
Yes.
So again, isn't the focus of collecting and having all this data, like how is this data valuable to the community and not just to the people who are going to fund it?
Exactly.
I mean, of course, I totally understand that these guys are putting a lot of money on the line, and there's a huge risk involved with governments changing and financial situations being volatile. It's totally justified, and of course they'll expect a profit for it. But
Yeah,
if it is totally towards their side, then there's no balance over here, no?
correct. So that is why, I mean, such large projects always have extensive community. Unfortunately, doesn't happen so much in India when it should, you are supposed to go through several community rounds and literally town halls where anyone from the public can ask you questions. And so, for example, when a government puts out an RFP, a request for proposal, you put all this together. But then it is several years, before it actually, goes through several processes, permits, protests, so it finally sees the light of day. And to your answer specifically on, can't we use data to kind of change this trend? So I'll share an interesting case which is not evident in this project. So after this project, I did another study saying that if data is always following speculation, it's like I call this market trend. It can be in some ways show through data that you could have investors could have gotten a similar deal in somewhere else. So that is what they typically call social impact investing, where it's not that they are giving it out for free. They'll say if commercial, hardcore market project will give me 18% return, I'm happy to take a 15% return and call it social impact. That's typically what these big guys will do. And I'll show you how data can help there. So I was studying the Seaport District, price rise and trying to analyze with all the, the big data set I showed you of Comstack, that if I was an investor who invested in the Seaport District 10 years ago, what my returns would be today, right? This is following where property market is hot. As a contrary scenario, I said, what if we promote public transport, which is a community public good, which is, subsidized? And say if I had invested in an area where public transport extension was proposed, if I invested there, what were my returns on investment? If I invested 10 years ago. So I analyzed that. I took old buildings in both these areas, pretty much built at a similar time, similar rental rates before any kind of upgrades or any kind of policy change, similar kind of investment in them. So based on baking in a lot of similarities, I tested for for 700 properties. And I found that, for example, the Green Line extension, Boston, basically another metro line, public transport line extension, it generated equivalent or more returns on land speculation or investment as the Seaport District. So, for example, if this data was presented to government or you're an investor, the investor could have been told, listen, government could have been told, listen, there is equal opportunity of returns on investment by following where there is greater public good than trying to create something artificial and market it or sell it very hard, right? So, for example, the Seaport District project it's highly controversial. A lot of people, including senior MIT professors, question it, saying it is very, very prone to sea level rise. So why should we be building there at all? And people from the government will come and say, well, but the amount of economic value is generating, the city can probably afford to build a seawall, a dike to prevent flooding. So there's a seawall dike will cost us $600 million. But the returns, the amount the government will earn and the jobs that will be created by this development far exceeds that. So they'll do a cost benefit analysis and say, no, let us work with this. Even though climate change activists will tell you this is a no-go, right? So there is data coming in. It is about making a case, convincing the people who have power. In this case, in an investor, if I convince an investor that take 2% less return or take the same return and invest where there is more public good, maybe I could have convinced them.
But,
right?
but the trick is over there also, because in this method, like for example, the Highline project, it actually it was sold as doing the greater good and bringing premium, but it actually caused more urban gentrification. It made, so again, like it's like the same vicious circle. So even
no, it's not. See, I think government perhaps wasn't. Again, I'm not the most familiar with New York, but the government could have been more proactive. For example, there's this whole thing called land value capture, right? Where you say if because of a government investment or public facility, if the land value speculation is likely, any kind of deals that are signed after announcement or construction of the project, any undue speculation in those deals or any gains, a large part of it should be taxed or should be given towards a fund that could be redistributed towards the people being affected by gentrification. You can call that a cess or whatever. So that is conventionally called land value capture. So this is again like government should have been one step ahead on policy and said that we'll redistribute the gains. Because see, any development, any improvement, in any kind of investment anywhere, any improvement is going to increase value of the lands around. The question is, who should gain from this? So if government invested thousands of crores in a metro line, and now suddenly, South Bhopal and Ahmedabad is hot property because in future, you can get from there to the airport in no time. Who should gain from the land value speculation? Because of BRTS, it's well connected. Who should gain? Should South Bhopal property owners be gaining? Or should, the people, the farmers who got displaced be gaining? Because the farmer will think, oh, I did not know it would happen. I would have held on to selling my land. So you see, this is, suppose you're a South Bhopal apartment owner and someone told you, listen, your property when you bought it was this much, but now after we announced the metro line, your property value has become this. So you need to pay this much surcharge every time you rent or every time you sell. Anyway, the property gains tax. So the question is, will public like it? Who's your audience? Who is really excessively rich? So, for example, a lot of real estate in the US will be owned by large sovereign wealth funds from China, things like that. In fact, a lot of real estate is owned by pension funds. So then you'll say, pension fund kaun hai? Pension fund is, middle class people jinka PPF mein paisa laga hua hai. And it is basically your pension is coming from that sovereign wealth or that pension fund. So should the pension fund earn or not? Right. So it's all if you're part of the market economy, it's a pretty round, pretty circular kind of a thing. And questions of ethics have to be dealt on a very case by case basis because everything is connected.
True. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I realize we are going over time. Okay.
So, Rushil, yeah, I think let's head to the next next segment. Yeah. So, Tajni, also, I think a lot of the questions that you've been posing, I think a lot of things might get clearer also in the next part where he talks about Bandhu and how he's used data in order to sort of solve a problem that is much larger than and reaches grassroots also. So I think Rushil, you can take it.
Yeah. Oh God, we are almost 30 minutes down, right? Just tell me how behind are we running?
Yeah, it's okay. Just
No. Accordingly, I'll just.
We have about 20 minutes for Bandhu now. So.
Oh gosh. Okay. All right. I'll keep my answers brief now on. Okay. So. Yeah. Can people see my full screen? Just confirm if you can see my full screen. Okay, fine. Okay. So effectively, this is part of my study, like I said, but as we're trying to understand and start to quantify this, what we call informality. What is really the role of information and data, and how can we really quantify, the losses that people are making in migration? Because as you know, India primarily is being driven by migration, migration-driven urbanization. If you say, well, 45% of India is still, barely 40% is urban. Official statistics say 30%. Well, how is it really becoming urban? What is the process? Who are the people who are doing this? Are they getting a fair deal? And answer perhaps is no, given the current crisis, as we see millions of migrant workers are left stranded. So yeah, going ahead, the structure broadly is, I'm going to give you some broad context, some essential research questions. I'll walk you through the methods, which include quantitative and qualitative methods, which include GIS, spatial statistics, and some statistical analysis using R. And then how you weave together those stories, those field observations, geospatial data analysis, data science kind of methods, and then what that really leads to. So diving straight in, we know India is urbanizing, as you can see. So smaller circles are smaller circles, for example, in 1950. So in 1950, this dark circle, Calcutta was a big city, but you see it hasn't grown much. Comparison, Delhi is expanding like crazy. So of course, there are certain trends. How do we have some sense of data? Well, census to begin with has been a great source. 2001 census quantifies where are people moving to, from where, and of course it asks very basic questions like, where were you living in the last 10 years? How long have you been here? Where did you come from? Stuff like that. So based on that, they've created various thicknesses mean how many people in thousands. So for example, 3 lakh people moved from Uttar Pradesh to Maharashtra, or 2 to 3 lakh moved to Gujarat, Karnataka to Maharashtra, almost 3 lakh people. This is on an annual kind of a basis. So you're seeing, well, Gujarat, Maharashtra are hotspots. Karnataka is a hotspot, and most people sending people out are Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. But how do people really end up? It's not like you're a migrant. You decide. It's not like you book a holiday. Ki kal udhar jana hai and I'm set. It's like you land up and you find, oh, there's no job. Oh, I'll keep going to the Naka. Oh, but I didn't find housing. So this is a very common condition. Dharmraj, our teammate, took this picture on one of those platform connecting bridges in Mumbai, and you realize this is the process most people go through. For a migrant worker, for example, he'll spend 9 months in a village, 3 months in a city, and there he'll say, ki, I have to go back, help my father on the farm. But suppose this guy gets married, he, has one more member, his spouse, who can help out in the family farm. He'll say, okay, I need to earn more now to provide for a wife and a young child. And he'll spend even more time working in a city. He'll be disconnected from family. He'll only go back home for Diwali. And, making that more money there and earning small amounts with the, village. And of course, once a child is older, he'll say, oh, I'm better set in the city. I want to put my child in English medium school. So maybe the family will start to then, spend more time in the city. And anyone who has even domestic help, all familiar that, your domestic help says, I'm going to my village for 1 month, comes back after 2 months. I mean, because this is effectively this is their cycle, this is their life. They are caught between rural and urban. So again, this is some more data based on NSS, which is National Sample Survey, which happens every 5-7 years. That used to. Again, this is now percentage of houses where a migrant has gone in search of work. So you see, again, UP, Bihar, greater than 25% of households have sent people out. And you see, again, Maharashtra, Gujarat are receiving states. Interestingly, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka are starting to catch up. This is interesting, that point where, Bangalore is starting to become the Silicon Valley of India, or rather pretty established. Tamil Nadu, the automobile industry picks up. And now we see 2016-17. Of course, there hasn't been a census, right? There isn't enough census data on it. There isn't enough NSS data on it. What we have is railway data. And railway data basically says, okay, what is net passenger inflow, outflow? I can use Hindi, kitne logon ne ticket kataya or kahan gaye, net inflow, outflow. Again, you see all the reds and oranges, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra, Tamil Nadu, they all have net inflow of passengers, and these states have net outflow. Right, so there is a clear trend going here. So you can divide India into 2 parts, where economic opportunities and money is, and where there is more poverty. So you see, this is not direct data, but these are proxies. And you see, this is very high level. How do I go in deeper? Well, this is when I introduce night light data. So this is simply a satellite picture of light. This is before 2014. Because after 2014, the government has extensively done electrification, and so most small villages have electricity. So the data before 2014 is reliable to say if there is a large blotch of light, it means there is GDP or something like that. So this is also the corridor I was trying to study for the high-speed rail project, which was proposed along this line. And of course, I went into the field. I went to villages. What do you think about this project? Would you move to a city? What is your work like? Where do you migrate? So I pretty much took a car and drove around in interior areas along that corridor, villages, cities, industrial towns. I was sitting with people, throwing fertilizer in their cornfield, asking them about the situation. I attended community meetings in tribal villages. Of course, went, sat in their houses, their fields, understood what, especially these are people who migrate and come back to farm. And of course, they lived in beautiful houses, beautiful farms, and you wonder why they ever might want to migrate to a dirty city. And this is where you realize that people aren't necessarily making what is called a wage maximization decision. They are not always just saying, I want to just become as rich as I can, and that's why I'm going. They are in a dire need and a variety of situations in which they will go, including, if someone has agricultural land or not, is it on rent or not, is there 24, rather a permanent 12 months water supply or not, is it rain-fed agriculture, is it rocky soil, sandy soil, is it, so there are tons of parameters. So we went to Dharavi extensively, sat with people who had migrated, understood, why, what they were doing. For example, this man here used to sell idli and vada every morning. He used to traditionally be tapper of, palm jaggery. They would climb trees, tap palm jaggery. But then there was a drought in the village. The palm trees stopped producing that sap. So the entire village had to migrate. Right? Those are kind of stories. So you say, okay, what are the key determinants of their migration choices? What are their trade-offs? Are their choices rational? What are the barriers? What information do they use to migrate? And when they do migrate, what is the value that they lose financially? And so what makes a city attractive to a migrant? So that's how I jumped in. Of course, I talked about the interviews. I also look at where they migrated from to where they have to, their destination. What are the economic characteristics of the source region, the destination region, and also data unique to the individual, which I picked up through personal interviews. And then, of course, you understand, the differences between migrating with or without information and quantify what value was gained or lost in the process. So, well, key takeaway, the migrants are basically hedging. By hedging, I mean it's an either or situation of wage differential, that is making more money versus losing out on social capital. And the second thing they say is getting permanent housing or proper reliable housing is the biggest barrier that prevents them from settling down in a city. It's either too expensive or unreliable or bad conditions, things like that. So of course, a lot of scholars who already done work on this before. Most point, migration is either a last resort or as a way to maximize the family income, where you say, I have 3 sons, I'll send the younger to the city, 2 of them will help me in the farm. So this is, again, building on the work of economists from the 1970s up to 2015. There's something called a utility model. If I may just take a minute to explain it. Utility basically is, according to this formula, the wage that you get in destination multiplied by time to spend in destination plus the wage in origin into the 1 minus time, because this time you already spent. This is basically total earning. Earning in city, earning in village, minus how much of social cost. That is what is the cost of social separation. Now, like I said, these things become so difficult to quantify tangibly, right? Well, how can you quantify the value lost in being away from your young child? That's so. Of course, we try to use proxies for that. And this is where you say, well, a good proxy is what is a wage differential? That is how much you are gaining in wage versus how far you migrated from. So we also found most people are migrating within 700 kilometers. And why I say that? Because most people use railways or subsidized state transport buses to migrate, and they effectively, railways is highly subsidized. So the price doesn't change dramatically depending on how far you're coming from. It's a fairly linear progression. And that's where I jump into data, like census, there is OpenStreetMaps, the Central Sample Survey Organization, there's Nightlight data of the IDFC Institute, there's data.gov.in, there is real estate data. So again, 6 or 7, data sources, and put them all into a massive GIS database map. So just to highlight, this on the left, the map generated from census tells you population density. And you see it's by district, so it's fairly broad. And on the right is from Nightlight data. And here you can actually zoom in to see which cities are very dense, like Mumbai here, Delhi. And you see that certain areas which are not urban or cities, but still fairly dense, like in Bihar and UP. You zoom in and this is what you see. So on the left, this is a map at the same scale. On the left is Mumbai. On the right is Patna and the outskirts. See, Mumbai is concentrated. Nasik is concentrated, Vapi is concentrated. You see, it's not spreading out. It's rail network to rail network. There is nothing in the middle. Like roads are not generating value. You see, Bihar, there's thickening along these arteries, but there's no concentration. So it gives you some idea that jobs and value is not concentrated, but fairly evenly distributed along road networks. And you say, okay, what does this really mean? And this is each pixel is 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer pixel here. So I superimpose that by, with public transport access, which is rail, road, highways. So I assume if a migrant is, in a random point here and wants to go to a random point there, how much of value can be captured by moving from this point to this point by a certain buffer? Same way, if a migrant is in this point moving to that point, how much value? Simple logic is a migrant can only be in one place at one time, and only that's how much value he can capture. right? So of course, if more value is concentrated in one place, migrant can possibly profit more or gain more. So that's exactly what I did. On the left is all the origin buffer regions. Here are all the destination buffer regions in the Ahmedabad-Mumbai corridor. I took all the rail networks that they used. On the, so diving further, you kind of try and understand GDP in $1 million per square kilometer, and you kind of zoom in into the Ahmedabad-Mumbai corridor. You clearly see how hot, like how red, deep, dark Mumbai is compared to other cities. And then you see Ahmedabad, and you see how Ahmedabad is really spreading out, like Gandhinagar, Himmatnagar, and peripheries. And again you see, places like Baroda, places like Surat, Vapi, there's Ankleshwar and Bharuch. And you also see the direction. For example, you see how Baroda is growing more and more towards the Dahej SEZ, which is here. Right, so you clearly see where value is being extracted, where developers, so a real estate developer also you think this is how the trend is, this is where things will heat up. So I'm to show you how granular nightlight derived data can also start giving you some trends. So of course you put that buffer in the destination and you compute. So now it's all statistical. Bear with me, if this seems a little too alien. So here what I've done is simply each column, this is a bar graph, each column is a migrant. This is basically averaging out all the migrants who made this journey. So in the bottom, you can see Balamba to Surat, Balod to Surat, or for example, Chhapra to Bharuch, Chiplun to Mumbai. So these are all the journeys that various migrants took between these routes. And this is how much of gain they made in their average wage by making this decision. So this is, for example, an annual gain. This is in dollars. So suppose the highest gain that was seen was someone who went from Midnapur to Kolkata who made a gain of $700 annually. Whereas you see some people actually made a loss, and you'll wonder why. Why is this coming? But this is interestingly in the lowest quartile, which is the poorest 25% of the people who are surveyed. And you also see in general a consistent gain in the median value. Median basically is the middle of the population or the survey sample set. One interesting thing is while they made the migration decision, in previous cases there was always a gain in wage, but here you see the GDP per capita is gaining earlier, but the population is not increasing. So you're seeing the buffer region, maybe where they're coming from, in general has more people, more population than the destination. That's again curious because you think bigger city means more population. So another thing is, maybe where they're coming from are overcrowded and there just isn't enough economic opportunity. So they're going to places which may be more crowded like Mumbai or Ahmedabad, but economic opportunity per capita is more. And this is where you throw all your data into an R script and you try and plot it in various ways and eyeball certain patterns. Don't try and even read this. It's a mess, and that's why you get into regression analysis, where you look at statistical methods like p-values and adjusted R-squares and stuff like that. So here, see, for example, in the median, consistently migrants are losing. So basically here is GDP per capita median and how far they are migrating from. So logic says the further away you're going from home, the more and more money you should be saving. Idhar to bilkul ulta ho raha hai. They are saving lesser and lesser money the further they go from home. So you say something is seriously wrong. They're either being very stupid or something is really screwed up in their situation that they are losing the more they go. So they're losing more social capital. They also aren't gaining enough money. And then you think that, okay, what is it? And, based on the qualitative interviews, right, lack of information was a major reason. So we try to, in a small data set, we try to see, you use information as a dummy variable where you see if people had information, did it change the situation? And well, the answer is yes. So here, though the p-values are very low, which suggests that there's a lot of noise in the data. Someone has a question, you can follow up with me on that. But noise in the data means that there might be several other factors influencing this. But there is definitely a trend that with information, you make a better decision, you gain more. And so then you kind of test this out further. If you had information, you plot the wage saved versus how far you came from. You see the steady upward trend. So if you have information, the farther away you came from, you make a proportionate gain in your savings. So this is a very, very, you'd say a very positive sign that, oh, here I'm probably able to identify a problem which can be solved. There is something here. There is information asymmetry probably that can be solved. Another thing you see is there are steep gains in the first 700 kilometers. So people, of course, who are coming within 700 kilometers, they are rising very quickly to the top. Whereas people coming from further, it's a flatter curve, even though they are making gains. So you say, oh, this is interesting. Why are they gaining within 700 kilometers? You'll try and answer, oh, maybe they have better access to the community because it's closer. Maybe they can make more frequent trips. Maybe part of their family is already in these close by cities, and so they call them up and they have better information. There's several reasons you may think, but the answer is yes, proximity, which for these people probably means more information, is definitely a benefit, and there, though we have limited information, we can say that information does play a role in helping people make a better migration decision and gain financially. Another interesting thing we found was most people spend a majority of their income, almost as high as 50%, on rent. So these migrants go to city, they don't go and own their home, they live on rent. It could be rental house, a kholi in a slum. If you've seen all your Mumbai movies, everyone lives in a one-room kholi, they pay 10,000 for it, it's all rental. They lose their job, they can't pay rent for the next month. That's pretty much how, from my experience in PMAY in Andhra, almost 80% of informal housing was on rent. So which is crazy. And given this migrant housing situation, that's precisely why a lot of people may want to escape home, because if employers are not paying them, they can't afford to pay rent for the next month. And they'll say, okay, I just want to exit even if I'm on the road. And this is where you'll see people are spending a disproportionate amount of their money on rent if they come from closer, within 500 kilometers. Again, this is a very interesting question. Why within 500 kilometers? We just discussed that they have more information. So are they being stupid and paying more rent? Well, there's another interesting story to this which says, what is the intent by which people are trying to migrate? Are they trying to migrate to become permanent citizens of that urban area, or are they migrating for a short time? And that's kind of the answer, where if you migrated from very far away, you were living with 5 or 6 other guys in a small room and sharing and paying 300 rupees a month as rent because you didn't plan to settle down there permanently. You wanted to save as much as you can so you could send home. Whereas if you migrate from close by, you have relatives, you have family in the city, you also want to move there. So it's almost like muh dikhai, you can't be seen living in a shoddy condition. So by default, you're forced to spend more on housing because you're part of a community, because you intend to live a more permanent life, because you have your wife and kid with you if you're a single male migrant, So this kind of starts to explain this. And then you'll say, okay, if rental markets are taking so much of their income, why is it taking so much of their income? And so you dive into real estate analysis in Mumbai, where this is, of course, data from several real estate data sources, which are fairly granular, which gives you price per square foot in Mumbai. You can clearly see South Mumbai is fairly expensive, it tapers off as you go north. And just to say, well, how valid were my, methods on using granular nightlight derived data, you will say, oh, well, this is giving exactly the same trend, where, South Mumbai is hot property as you go north. It tapers off. Second, railway lines are generating value. Although there's road connection between the two or whatever, you'll say, well, road connection hasn't generated enough value. It's a railway that from station to station. And this is precisely what you jump into when you want to plot those data points. So I basically plotted all those data points on, price per square foot versus latitude. Because as you see, Mumbai becomes cheaper as you go north. So all of this is formal real estate, and you see the steady slope, very significant statistically. I also did all my, my inputs from Dharavi and other informal settlements, and they follow kind of the same curve. And then you say, well, these people are almost paying as much as, market rate, like if they take in formal housing. And why are they paying so much for getting terrible facilities? If you add up all their stuff, like, for example, lots of houses in Dharavi don't have an attached toilet. They have to use a community toilet where they have to pay per use, if you're single, or you have to get a family toilet card made. If for a family of 4, you'll pay 500 or 400 per month to use toilet. So you can imagine that's a cost, If you're earning 10,000 rupees a month, so to 500 rupees, you have to set aside 5% of your monthly income to just use a toilet for your family. If you're a single migrant, it's pay per use, 5 rupees, 10 rupees per use. Just think if you have diarrhea, what happens? So these are the kinds of issues you have to deal with. And that's where, these conditions are, pretty interesting when you start to quantify them and use the same lens. I would use for real estate private equity. I use that Excel model for Dharavi and I get very interesting results. And this is what I find, there are two models running there. One is monthly rent 6,500, 20,000 deposit, a 10-year, at a 10-year, 10% annual discount rate, your future value is 11 lakhs. The second model that goes around, because the risk here is you can be thrown out of your apartment or your kholi anytime. There's no guarantee, no security. So based on that, your job might be affected, your kid's school might be affected. So everyone is looking for more permanence, more surety, right? And so you say you pay 4.5 lakhs upfront, and then you don't have to pay any rent for 10 years. So in this case, you say, but why is a landlord happy to get this much? Because he can't increase the rent anytime then for 10 years. Because there the future value you saw was 11 lakhs, 11.6. So for 60,000 rupees ke liye, landlord is going to do, this kind of a bargain. And then you say, well, this is not a valid way maybe of comparing the two, because no one has that money upfront. When they do, they have to lend it. They effectively lend it in the market. And that's where you realize it's being lent at 5% per month. You compound that, it's 128 times that figure. So, if it's 1.1 million rupees, it's 128 million rupees. So effectively, over a 10-year period, that is your cost of informal, affordable rental housing in true financial sense. Suppose you don't want to agree with that analysis, for a moment, say that is a little too far-fetched. Let's compare it to other studies that was done, in Africa and Malaysia, where they said, what is the premium on security of housing tenure? So they say usually it's 7 to 20%. Even by those standards, India is 45% premium, which is again disproportionate. And to give you an example, which all of us can relate to, because at some point of time we all lived in rented apartments when we are studying or working. Let's say, I'm giving a Dharavi model, and let's compare it to Ahmedabad. So, give you an example, before we get into this, Ahmedabad, you can buy, suppose, a 3-bedroom apartment for 2 crores. You can rent that for, let's say, how much? 25,000 rupees a month. That is approximately 3 lakhs per year, right? So you'll say 2 crores I bought, and I'm only getting, annualized rent on it, 3 lakhs per year. That is like 2%, it's less than 2.5% of yield. And you compare that to Dharavi, you can buy a 3-floor kholi for 2 million, 20 lakhs. Monthly revenue on that is 15,000, and your annual revenue is that. So effectively, your yield is 9.3%. So if I'm an investor and I have 1 crore to invest, right? My yield from Dharavi on that 1 crore will be, 10 lakhs. But yield, if I give in formal market, is going to be like 2 lakhs. So I'll say, wow, I will just on 1 crore, I will earn 8 lakhs, 4 times, So any investor will jump at this, but there's several other reasons. So again, you're saying, if there is so much of value being captured in the market, who's capturing it? Where is it going? And this is the most basic model. I am more tempted to follow this 128 times model because this is the true cost. Trying it back to really what it means for the migrant worker, I'm saying all migrant workers are not the same, and not every life situation at any point of time is same. The same migrant worker will have different life situation when he's 17, when he's 25, when he's 30. This study showed that, don't get into the numbers, but it clearly shows that for a low-income worker in the early stages of his career, he'll save more or she'll save more in Ahmedabad than in Mumbai for the early years. But as they progress, maybe they should go to Mumbai. Why? Because Mumbai has a better network, and you can and once you get into the Mumbai network, it's a much larger city, you can jump jobs more frequently. And the gain in job, your gain in your wage will be much, much faster. It will far outweigh your wage gain in Ahmedabad, even if you balance out rent. So imagine if a migrant worker had कि भैया 18 से 20 साल की उम्र में अहमदाबाद में रहो, 20 से 25 सूरत में रहो, 25 से 30 बॉम्बे में रहो. If he had that, just imagine how he could plan or she could plan their life. And this is kind of what we're trying to get into. So this is where we're saying, well, yes, all migrants are smart. They are making a decision where they are making money, but it is not commensurate to the social cost. They could have done better. Having information within 700 kilometers increase their advantages. Second thing, affordable, housing is the biggest reason why they cannot progress, because they're competing draws on capital, like, daughters' wedding, family, sons or daughters' education, there will be, housing loans, there will be sudden death or sudden medical emergency. So there are tons of things where, they need sudden capital, huge amounts, and they don't have money for all, for your wedding, 5 lakh for education, 5 lakh, 25 lakhs they don't have. They'll have 5. The remaining 20, they'll have to borrow at 5% per month. So this is effectively, if we can change this for them, where we start to figure out their housing, their employment security, getting them financial inclusion, better lending rates, we are solving 4 other problems. So this is where I'm talking about, well, let's classify, according to data, classify where the migrant is in his phase of becoming urban. From a temporary migrant of 3 months per year to 9 months per year, single migrant, to a permanently urban single migrant, to finally someone who's married with wife and kids in a village. Again, forgive the the male assumption here, but this is, most of the data is single male migrant. Then again, once the entire family is in the city, it's a permanent urban family. This is the point at which the kids can go to a proper school in a city. The kids can probably go to an engineering college or become a doctor or any of these professionals, and they become a white collar worker in the next generation. And that is when you say this is complete integration with the urban middle class. I bet you had so many people whose parents came as cowherds from Saurashtra to Surat, and within one generation now they've become, they got educated, they became engineers, and they set up their plants. Now they're industry owners. So you've seen that mobility in 30 years. And this is where we're saying, what are the recommendations for the private sector? Very clear, if we can solve information asymmetry using big data, we can really nudge migrants to make better decisions. And this is where I'd like to introduce our venture Bandhu. We are enabling low-income workers to make more insightful migration decisions. So how it currently works for everyone is, worker of course finds it hard to get housing and employment in a city on a, irregular basis. They have to, of course, go through middlemen who also find it hard to source labor from villages, guarantee the labor will come to the employer, because they have to take high commissions. The employer is always struggling to get the right kind of labor on time. Landlord is worried about tenancy, getting, good rotation of reliable people. Everyone has a problem. So effectively, you're putting everyone onto a single platform with complete transparency, not throwing anyone out, not disrupting anyone, because even brokers, middlemen are community members. They are someone's uncle or nephew or someone in the community who's getting them jobs. So they also have a different model now to gain commissions and have revenue without being exploitative. And of course, with transparency and big data, a lot of AI can start helping migration decisions. So how it works? Well, this is late stage prototype. Our current early version is slightly different. So worker, this is going to be in multiple languages in India. Worker will put basic needs and skills, say how much he wants to send back home. Based on that, there'll be offers. Suppose the worker is located in this city, he'll have offers in multiple cities in India. For each city, the worker clicks on, they'll see various jobs, top rated jobs. They click on, they'll see geolocated options with various houses tied to each job location. And for each house they click on, they see a breakdown of income, rent, utilities, transport, and grocery costs in the area. Effectively net, how much can you send back home? And based on the top options, they can select one they like and matches them up, and they can keep doing that over their life cycle. So yeah, that's what we are doing. We are ready to launch our first version, hopefully in the next week. We've been intensely bug testing, but yeah, happy to take questions now, and apologies if I've eaten a lot into your time.
So thank you so much, Rushil. I think it's also a very interesting time to talk about the migrant situation, especially we're in the middle of this pandemic. Yeah, I think. Sorry, can you hear me?
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, so I think we'll just quickly open it up for questions. I'm sure people do have questions. So Nishita, you have a question. You can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me, Rushil?
Yes.
Hi, it was a very nice presentation. Actually, I have two questions. One is about talking about mobility at two scales. One is about mobility at once when you have migrated, when you've come to a place.
Yeah.
Then you have this mobility connection from your home where you're staying to your workplace.
Yes.
So how do you, when you're saying that your app will analyze all those transport connections, it will give you data about which is the, because a lot of things when a migrant worker comes, the question always stays that whether he decides his job first or whether he decides his place where he'll stay first. And
Correct.
how will he negotiate the everyday commute of everyday mobility between that? Because
Yes.
a large part of their income also goes into the transport which they do every day. So how will your apps? I mean, how are you? What are the indicators which will show you that calculation? And second is about mobility at a larger scale of migration. So in generally what we understand is that wherever the wages increases, the labor goes there.
Correct.
But when you see that a lot of migration is also happening because of kingship networks or because of social security in the urban, so then that whole idea of where if the wages increases, the labor will go there, falls
Yes.
a little bit apart. So how do
Yes.
you see
Yes.
that two scales of mobility playing?
Yes. I think both are very apt, very valid questions, very important
Hmm.
questions also. So let me start with, we draw a distinction between intra-regional migration and then migration within a city. So intra-regional migration, again, for this group, again, depends on how far they are coming from. So for example, someone is
Hmm.
coming from an immediate neighborhood, they might use, a small commuter rail, or they might use local bus services, or they use stuff like what private providers, for example, to go from Ahmedabad to Patan, there
Hmm.
are these big maxi vans who for,
Hmm.
40 rupees or 50
Yeah.
rupees will transport you, right? So
Hmm.
now this is the kind of market intelligence we would gather for,
Hmm.
because there's a threshold level for each size of commute,
Hmm.
intra-regional commute. What is the ticket size? Who are the operators? How do
Hmm.
you use a proxy? How do you quantify it, right? So this
Hmm.
is one method. Second, of course, if one is looking at state transport buses that are standard, it's a fairly
Hmm.
linear progression.
Hmm.
Third, if you want to start to integrate APIs of private
Hmm.
providers, because this is for the startup to become a late stage startup, when you can start having collaborations with certain bus services. Suppose you
Hmm.
have a pretty much skin and pretty much bare bones bus service, no
Hmm.
AC, lakde ka seats, solely
Hmm.
migrant service. So I can share a picture. Wait, it is, I mean, all of us are familiar with images where people even climb on top of the maxi truck. So I was looking at Mozda, because people go from Mozda to
Hmm.
Ankleshwar to work, right?
Hmm.
If you drive, it's fairly expensive, so no one can afford that ticket size, right? So the
Hmm.
maxi guy has calculated how many people he can fit and how much he can charge,
Hmm.
right? So this is all ground intelligence. If I go slightly outside that, it is purely railway timetables, and I can pull railway APIs, basically for what journey by sleeper class or general class, how much it will cost for what distance, right? So
Hmm.
those proxies are pretty clear. So that, I think, is a simpler part of it in terms of transport. In terms of where jobs are and where prices are increasing, yes, it is tied to several things, not just house pricing, but like you pointed out, networks of kinship. Thirdly, of course, I'd like to point out there is usually a lag between
Hmm.
the demand in the market, the pricing in the market, and the choice of migration. So suppose,
Hmm.
say someone sitting in a Goldman Sachs will know 2 months in advance that the market is going to, go down. I should disinvest. I should pull out or exit now. Whereas by the time Goldman Sachs pulls out its fund from the real estate fund, there is another 1 month before the real estate fund closes or announces closure of all projects. 1 month before, the contractor knows he's not going to get more work. 1 month before the migrant laborer knows there's no more work, or maybe 20 days before the guy in the village knows ab idhar kaam nahi hai, right? So imagine if you have those analytics to kind of speed that process up. So that's one part. Second, methods of kinship. Like I said, we are incorporating the middlemen who are typically these skins. Well, same. So, for example, if you see painters, in my experience as an architect, most of my painters came from one district in Western Bihar, right? Whether the painter group came to Jaipur or Udaipur or Bombay or Ahmedabad, most come from Western Bihar. Okay. Again, Now, these are jobs which have very low levels barriers to entry. They don't require too much skilling, right? Because you start with अच्छा लाठी भरने का काम है, that will be semi skilled. But किसी को बाल्टी उठानी है, someone has to just mix the thinner, that is absolute base level, right? So when they come, they kind of graduate through that, and you don't really have to wait to skill. You know that these people can immediately jump into any city, any sector, as long as there is some sense of community with them. So that's precisely what you do, because we take inputs like what is your native, explained intra-regional transport. I explained how we can understand demand, we can preempt demand, we can talk about considerations of kinship. Like I said, we're also onboarding them as middlemen or contractors, where they gain commissions by onboarding their own kins. So that's also tying them into effectively leveraging the social capital. So that's one part. Now let me shift to the within the city. So within the city, we already know GPS is fairly inaccurate. It has an error, for example, of 30 meters, and given how dense our cities are, you point to try and give the Uber driver that location, he'll say I'm here, but you find the entrance to that gate is from there. So we want to avoid all of that, obviously, and given thousands of people, roaming everywhere trying to find. So to begin with, we are starting with labor nakas, where government can also take arrangements to organize people, including enforce any kind of social distancing if required. So effectively, people are used to coming to a naka every day. So that's exactly what we are doing. We are gathering to a naka point, which is the closest naka, closest gathering point. So you know how Uber pool works. For example, if I may use an example, Uber pool will triangulate the closest pickup point where the current pool of people need to be, right? It'll tell you, for example, it'll ask you to walk 100 meters here, allow someone else to work here, right? So in a way, there is pretty simple methods by which you can ask people to organize themselves in a location, and then it's very simple. You think of how do most construction laborers land up at your site? They'll rent a rickshaw that will overload with 6 people and then come and deliver, right? So though we don't want to break laws and have overloaded rickshaws, but it is not difficult. There are startups like Jugnu is one. They're pretty sure they'll be
Rushil, can't hear you.
Yeah, once you call a late stage company, it is fairly easy to kind of triangulate that and organize a bundled, pickup. Suppose I say there are 60 people who have been given housing in this zone, for whom I need to organize 4 or 5 auto rickshaws or 1 staff bus, and then transport them to this job site. So anyway, there is APIs, there are proxies, there are several ways in which fairly simple solutions.
Yeah, just one last thing. Do you also consider the different migrant laborers and different type of employment? Because different type of employment have different migration and in-city mobility patterns. Yes. So will that be accounted for if it is?
I think it all depends on how much data we generate, because more the data, the more robust the learning algorithm becomes. Initially, we have to be very on the ground, very hands-on. Okay. It relies on for example, my understanding that, if you're from this community, you live here. If you are, for example, a mistri, you will earn 30,000 a month. Maybe, most mistris, most carpenters, electricians have their own motorbike, right? If you've seen, most of them have their own transport, right? So this is basic understanding that we have to build in to start with. And then through user feedback, you have to create data. Okay. Simple question on a landlord platform, for example, Mumbai will be, like Nishita, you pointed out, the rental for a kholi near a railway station is much more expensive than a kholi which is deep in the basti.
Exactly.
Because from the basti to the railway station, you have to pay 10 rupees to the shuttle per day, right? So that cost has to be baked into your rental cost. Right? So these are kind of on-ground data that we have to make into our analytics. Okay. So it requires, I think it requires people, you asking these questions. So we'll say, aisa hota hai idhar, we have to make it into our algorithm and, keep improvising.
Thanks, Rushil.
Yeah, I think we have Krishna. Krishna has a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Hi, Rushil. So great presentation. I really like the details that you went to for each
age research question. So I have two questions. The first question is, in the equation that you showed us before, you had put social cost, and you had
Yes.
tried to create a proxy in order to sort of understand what sort of social cost is the migrants are bearing. So my question is, how do you quantify climate risks in this situation? Because a lot of migration also happens due to environmental
Yes.
considerations, and a lot of environmental disasters change migration patterns. Like, let's say if you're migrating to Mumbai, you would have a higher risk of flooding. You would also run, like, you would not have the kind of social capital that you would have in your own rural villages, and that is why you would not be able to build back faster after a disaster. So do you take those environmental costs into consideration when you are also calculating the social capital? The social cost. And the second question is, your app depends on digital literacy to some extent, right? It depends
Yes.
on data literacy. It depends on people being able to look at data and being able to actually just operate the app on a mobile phone interface, right? So
Yes.
in India, digital literacy is
It's low. Yeah.
like, it is fairly low, especially in all these regions that you are currently targeting. So how do you address that? How do you cross that barrier?
Yeah. So let me just kind of rephrase. So one, the concern on data literacy, general literacy. So, and also second question is how many people really have a mobile phone? Right? So uh, that's one part. The second part, like you're saying, is about quantifying climate change risks. Right? Effectively quantifying various kinds of risks that may be there. And okay, so the first part, if you probably you've not seen our UI yet, it's super simple. It's very visual. It's very like you see an icon, you see a picture. We follow three-step process always, where you choose, you kind of choose, customize, confirm. That's it. So user is very engaged, very simple. So that, of course, people who are even eighth pass, I tested it with a lot of Uber drivers, and they all felt it's one of the simplest things they've ever used. So people who are already in that segment where they have a smartphone, it's simple. Now we talk about people who don't have a smartphone. So for that, we are onboarding people through this, the middleman, the kinship network, where someone else can operate the app for them, and they'll get notifications on their feature phone, on their non-smartphone, right? So you are controlling through your OTP, but your profile is being handled through someone you trust on their smartphone. And we came up with this because our first field testing last year said ki our family only two smartphones. What do we do? So we've accounted for that. We are currently in Hindi and English, Gujarati very soon. We are also going to build the IVR system, where IVR, right? You basically call up and say, iske liye ek dabaye, iske liye do dabaye, that kind of sequence, which requires a great degree of simplification, but that's a tech burden right now. So we're kind of holding that off. So that answers the first part. Now, the second part is about, like you said, about various risks. Now, the question now again about data, we're not giving them this spreadsheet of, ye tumhara data analysis hai, go figure. We are actually nudging them, right? For example, if we know that, right, there was this case where in Gujarat, suddenly there was this huge backlash against migrants from UP and Bihar. They were being like subjected to violence and stuff. That's news analytics, right? Suppose Bandhu has a notification that trust us for information, don't rely on fake news. We have analytics that don't go to Himmatnagar right now. So we'll never show them a Himmatnagar job point. And the simple ways in which you nudge them away from making bad choices. Second, about their risk, about preempting their risk. So there's several proxies you can use. For example, for most people who are Marathis south of Bombay, who come to work in menial jobs in Mumbai, primary reason they migrated out is their land is on a slope. Now, if you see what's happened the last few hundred years in India, it is strongly caste-based. So in fact, in Gujarat, those of you in Gujarat, you'll see most tribals occupy lands in the hills. Tribals always come from hill forests. The OBC castes, the Patidars, the Patels, come from the zones between outskirts of cities and the hills. They occupy the plains. And most upper castes are peri-urban or urban. Right? this is something that happens over several hundreds of years, where the hierarchy pushed the poorest, most disadvantaged to the worst land. Right? So forest land is very difficult to cultivate because it's, water doesn't stay. You cannot dig a well because you have to go very deep. Water doesn't, is difficult to handle. Forest rights, those laws are applicable. Land parcels become very small because to get a land, you have to step the land. That's not possible.
Yeah.
So you can only farm what can grow on a slope. Very often land is rocky on a hill. So most people in Ratnagiri, most people who migrated from Ratnagiri had land on a hill. And they were okay on land on a hill till what point? Is the point at which tractors became affordable to the OBC castes, right, to the market in general. Farm on a hill, right? So they only had bullock carts to farm on a hill. So now bullock cart and tractor you cannot compare the efficiency. So though everyone could not buy a tractor, people were renting tractors. Now if you rent a tractor, you cannot drive it or farm on a hill. Became bread and butter. Bullock cart became obsolete, and hence their hill lands became obsolete. And that is the point at which they migrated. Right? Simple analysis one can do. Maharashtra, which is primary parts of the Ahmedabad-Mumbai corridor, are at serious risk of running out of water. So you'll say, who should get water first, industry or agriculture? Right? This is something that's already analyzed. And you say there's a water risk here. What is the first community that is likely to rush out in search of jobs? What do I know about that community? And what kind of jobs can I plug them into? Like you see, most of your bharai labor or digging labor comes from Godhra, and they go back in monsoon. It's in fact quite beautiful that the only crop they get is monsoon rice crop, paddy. So you never find them in monsoon. You see them in the summer to dig in the harsh sun because there's nothing to do in the village at that time, right? Whereas when there's Diwali completion time coming up, your labor, most other labor will disappear for Diwali, but there's finishing time. So very often you see a lot of your fabrication, aluminium and glass fitting labor very often is Muslims from Western Bihar or Eastern UP who do not go back for Diwali. So that's why contractors also bake it in, right? So these are all, now imagine, I know this from just a few years of construction experience. Imagine there's an app with, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of data points, and an ML is doing this for you. It's probably I'm giving away too much, but yeah, this is.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
No, I think this is great. I mean, I think we really like to congratulate you on this also. I mean, I think it's a very sensitive approach to something which is so real, and that I think also we're facing almost on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, with that, I think we have one more question with Monique, and I think we can take one more after Monique. That's Tarjini.
Aman, feel free to jump in and cut me short because I am reasonably passionate about it to give long answers.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. Okay, Monique.
Hi Rushil, I had a couple of questions. So the app that you showed, wherein you are mentioning that the worker is a carpenter, a head mason, or a laborer, who keeps a check on what they are actually means? Who keeps a check on how their skills are as a carpenter? Like, is he a head carpenter or is he a helper carpenter? How is he? That's one. And the second question that I wanted to ask is, how does this model, how does Bandhu financially benefit out of all this?
So wait, if I can use my phone, I will try and at least demo the app to you. So for example, I don't know, this is the first screen you see when you, I probably can't do this, but okay. So we have simple categories, like we have replicated the labor naka basically. So labor naka, you go and ask, ki, mistri chahiye, whatever, brick mason chahiye, karigar chahiye, or you say ki helper chahiye, right? You will have that simple classification. That's how you start. You ask, are you karigar or helper? Because you ask someone, ki how will you rate yourself on a scale of 10? Everyone give themselves 9 on 10 or 10 on 10, right? But no one will lie to you whether they are karigar or helper. right? Because they get found out. The industry has decided who's karigar, who's helper. And based on the ratings over the progression of using we know how well a helper is moving from helper to karigar. Or if a karigar is consistently getting rated low, he maybe is helper, he's light. Or someone will just call us up and complain, right? So this is, I'm keeping it short. Tell me if I haven't answered completely. And about the finance part of it. So, like any platform play, when you have massive amounts of data going on it, there are several avenues to. For example, if people are constantly searching for jobs on the platform, right? Like people constantly searching Google for anything, right? Google becomes a hotspot for people to push in ads. So suppose, suppose we go that route, initially for the next 1 year, we don't want to put any ads. It's going to be completely free to use, no ads, nothing. And then after that, we'll see what is the nature of behavior, user behavior. People are just using it to search heavily, and our servers can handle that. We'll say, okay, let's go with, or the phones can handle it. Let's go with ad-based revenue. It's sizable. And if you feel that maybe people are willing to pay a premium to get the right kind of work at the right time, there are several models you can talk about. A platform model, like for example, Uber charges 25%, of the ride. We say we don't want to be that predatory. Even 15% we can work. That's one model. Second is you want to work with a SaaS model, software as subscription. Because at the end of the day, what are we? We are not employee. We are not worker. We are a software solution provider who's helping people connect to each other. So a SaaS model is where people pay a monthly subscription for usage of the platform. It could be as low as, pay 100 rupees per month if you do up to 10 hires. Between 10 to 100,000 hires, you're classified as MSME. Then you pay 1,000 rupees a month. If if you're hiring between 1,000 to 10,000, you are a industry level user. Then you pay us 15,000 per month. So just saying it, the tiering has to change because if the ticket size is small, someone like you who maybe constructs small projects with community through compartment S4 will say, I never hire more than 15 people in one go. So I'll say, okay, I'll charge you so much, and then there'll be 50,000 young architect come build companies like you who are happy to use it for a small fee. So that's tiered subscription. Third, of course, is as data becomes more and more valuable, financial data, we can start providing a tie-up with fintech providers, provide loans, other kinds of things. And anyway, we have a whole sequence of how all it can be financially sustainable. Right now, of course, we are backed by an MIT fund, few gracious angel investors, some prize money. So it's very tight. Like we haven't paid ourselves a salary in the last 9 months, but we're going to go and see how well this works. If you're able to solve a real problem for the people who are really in a crisis right now, I think it will really pick up, and hopefully even government may want to say, you know what, this is very useful to us. Let's chip in and pick up some of your costs. I don't know, we're hoping. Yeah. Yes, Tarjini has a question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Tarjini.
Just one suggestion, probably you can talk to the, like if you have identified the main source of migrant workers, like if UP or Bihar are the main sources, probably the Gram Panchayats can be a good source to just provide one smartphone and then they can handle the whole village. Like if you identify certain villages which have the maximum outflow, you can provide one smartphone to the Gram Panchayat who can handle the...
That's actually phase 2. That's phase 2.
I mean, it is just a suggestion that I was giving. Because most of the laborers don't have a phone above 1,000 rupees.
So phase 1, we are limiting to peri-urban areas and migrants who are through certain NGO networks to drive adoption. We'll have to think for later. Yeah.
Yeah, Tarjini has a question, and I think if anybody is getting late, they can feel free to leave also. Tarjini has a question, and then we'll take 2 more questions after that.
Yeah, hi. You have made a great presentation. I'm really impressed. But I do have one more doubt over here. So the labor, I'm from Mumbai actually. Labor and in construction business and as an informal sector, like you mentioned, the kinship network. Okay, sorry, I'm not able to frame it very precisely over here. But this labor is also a very huge capital to a lot of unions and a lot of Mathadi. I don't know. I know local terms. I don't know how to translate.
Use the local terms.
Yeah. So, like, for example, if my site is going on right now, after this COVID lockdown also, I can't let a truck deliver, for example, stones from Rajasthan to Mumbai at my site without paying some sort of a bribe to the local truck driver or the
Correct.
local gangs which are there.
Correct.
And then there are certain informal unions, not the government regulated labor unions, but community managed unions who also regulate people who come in and go out and how they are paid and they take their cut from it and all that. So it's not always a very happy scenario. There's a lot of politics in it also. How will these things be tackled, these issues? Because right now this app is really idealistic, and I love it that way because I'm a very idealistic person. But handling my first project right now, I've come across these issues which are there as a gray part of our practice.
Yeah, so they're everywhere. They're everywhere. I've also faced those with, and I know project that collapsed because of local, unions and mafia asking for a cut on the material delivered. So of course these things happen on a very, very case by case basis and city by city. So the app, as I've explained to you, is an ideal case scenario. We are starting only with Ahmedabad in our current launch, Ahmedabad and peripheries. We are going through existing networks for deeply embedded. To the extent, we ask a question: if you have to go to the labor naka, who is the dada of the labor naka? Dada is, I'm using it in a polite way, that who controls everything, who knows stuff. And that is how you have to go. You have to build community networks. We can't be a top-down tech solution. Like I said, all intelligence has to come from the ground. So there are certain people who need to be spoken to, who need to be taken into confidence about, you need to be shown how important it is, or maybe they can also benefit from it. It is a negotiation, and hence you try and find the most, I'll say influential stakeholders before you jump in, because you are hitting the ground.
But a lot of people act as takedars of this labor market also, and it's a very big thing.
Yeah, so that's what they are the ones who get onboarded on a platform. We have a contractor section where they can get consistent commission after they've onboarded a worker.
Yeah, but their human nature, as far as I have seen it, your app will tackle the financial aspect of it, but they won't their need and their I don't know how to put this, but they're used to throwing around some power, and I really don't know how to put this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is probably the
personal experiences.
The biggest worry. But you have several channels. Like everyone is connected to someone, right? So, for example, I did implement stuff with in Ahmedabad, the old city, on the iLead India program. We started off on our own. We found for example, we're implementing here. Where will you get more support? Who are the people? We found at that point of time it was the leaders of the Ganesh festival, youth leaders. And then we found, well, it was certain organization, Khadia. Eventually, it was basically a large part of the BJP youth workers who actually came on board and supported. So it all depends on how you look at us. Initially, we never thought we'd ever have anything to do with any political entity, right? After some point, people are still doing something so wonderful, and you are collaborating with us. We still feel empowered, so we're going to support you, and it worked out. So I think it's all about implementation, and implementation here is it is a social skill more than anything, I'd say. So hence, whom you partner with, whom you speak to on ground is super critical. It cannot be a tech solution like Uber like Uber, of course, disrupted. The taxi unions they had to deal with, right? Massive taxi unions in Delhi.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
So it's not like it is impossible. Yes, it is hard, but if people see a benefit, I mean, there's no one answer to what you're asking.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, but great initiative, and I wish you all the very best for it.
Thank you.
So we have one more question from Vedanti.
Yeah.
Vedanti.
Hi, Rushil. Thanks for the presentation. So actually, my question, since you mentioned a bit about the caste and where these people come from, the caste stratification that automatically exists in a Indian society like ours, I wanted to know, like, if you have taken such considerations into the app, especially since you're dealing with migrant housing and the rural and urban. There is a very demarcated caste stratification that exists in the rural, and when you're and then when you take informal settlements like the slums, there are again certain communities dominating over the other. So is there such issues which have also informed
that is exactly what we are working on right now. So if you are an intern or a team right now, this is exactly your task for the next 3 months, by 2 months. And also, yeah, if anyone wants to join as an intern, you can put the word out there. We are hiring. Currently, we hired our first people from TIS Mumbai, Tata master students from urban policy and governance and stuff. So anyway, this is a very, very important critical point, and this is one of those large questions of how can technology and society, how do they inform each other? Because you can't explicitly say that give someone a landlord an option which castes he is willing to keep people from, because that is a clear violation of privacy policy, clear violation of equality. It's clear discrimination. At the same time, then like you're saying, you'll land up and then the employer or the landlord will say, "Nahi, I can't live with this person." And so how do you do that without asking those questions explicitly to either of them?
right? So what are your strategies as of now? Have you guys figured out anything?
We have a few, and that is going to be heavily supported by the ML model, and probably that's something we'll patent. So we have a few ideas, and I think probably a public forum is not the right place to share that, since it's probably patentable information as of now.
Okay.
But in a private conversation, yeah, I mean, I can clearly share how.
Sure, yeah, sure. Now, I have one more question actually. So the initial part of the presentation was mainly on the real estate, like deriving data for real estate design, essentially. And the second part was on Bandhu, and the data in this case was more like from a larger point of view, where you're looking at the entire demographics or like the data point in the country, boil down to a certain region, and let's say do a similar real estate analysis like you did in Boston and India. What do you think, like where do you think is data lacking majorly, and how do you think we can fill in the gaps?
Firstly, I think India as of now is in housing. Like most rentals are not, you don't sign a lease which is registered in an office, which is then a public record from where a tech company can pull the record and populate a database. So that doesn't, that happens heavily in commercial real estate right now. So you have startups, like PropStack, Bombay-based startup that does that, where they go through the entire effort of collating that, and you can have a subscription for them and get that data. That's exactly how RCA and CompStack in the US also work. So there is commercial real estate data in big cities like Bombay, Bangalore, anywhere where there are multinationals, because you see, multinationals don't buy office space. As a policy, they are not allowed to. FDI, it's not the automatic route when you have to purchase real estate. So they always rent real estate also because they can write it off on tax obligations. So that is how, and also they are more transparent to those companies. So that's how you end up with good data there. Cities like Ahmedabad are too small because there isn't enough MNC presence, so you won't really have substantial. Even a company like PropStack perhaps won't invest in putting a team together for Ahmedabad real estate. When you say, okay, now where do I get data? You say, okay, maybe proxies. I can use proxy. The proxy basically is, understand the word proxy. Original nahi hai, to proxy use karna padega. So you say, acha, proxy, what can be a proxy? And you say, well, listing is one method. There's 99 acres, there's housing.com, there are all these websites and people keep posting. But you'll say people post any random stuff on it. They post any price for sale, all that. So how do you work with that? Yeah, we have worked with stuff like that in the past, especially like in Mexico, a similar site. And we first try to understand what is the real estate site saying. And you'll observe, now this is market intelligence, that real estate site on by default is marking up by 30%. So if I'm a broker, when I call you in person, you will tell me 100 rupees. You put it up on the site, you'll say 130 because you want to have more of a leeway for negotiation. And you want to not disclose, you want to get a good proxy for what is the price in an area. You will kind of pick what that's a demand analysis. Who is driving demand in the area? Simple like basic thing will be, Judges Bungalow Road, there's a place for Gola. Even driving by, you see how many luxury cars park outside that Gola versus how many luxury cars outside the next Gola. Will immediately know what should be the minimum price of Gola at this Gola wala versus the next Gola wala, right? A simple proxy. You do not even have to get down from your car and go and see the ticket, the price. So these are methods they use, and of course, if you have large data sets, you can build a regression model and.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thanks.
I don't know if I answered that.
Yeah, pretty much answered.
Okay. Do we have any other questions, or shall we wrap it up? I think.
If anyone wants to get in touch, you can just write to us at info@bandhu.work. I'll just share that slide in case you want our contact details. So we are looking to launch by end of next week. I mean, hopefully, unless we find major bugs testing the app. So people who are around can follow us on Insta or Facebook or on our website and check stuff out. And of course, we are happy to kind of engage on any questions people may have. That's the website and that's the email. But this is one of the most crucial times we've faced in terms of the urgency of rolling it out and ensuring it's a stable app. And any suggestions are always welcome. Just write to us. Right now, I'm not too sure how quickly we'll be able to get back because it's happening. And also open to interns or if you're a full stack developer, software developer, we're also hiring. Sorry for using that platform a little bit of
No, but thank you so much, Rushil, for doing this. I think it's a important time to be doing this, and we all wish you all the best for Bandhu, and we hope. I think the way the vision of this app is not only for like an economical or economical gain, but it also can help in a lot of social and socio-political reforms as well. And we're also very excited to see what comes out of it. Maybe a year down the line we'll have another FNC of where is Bandhu now. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you everybody for joining and bearing in with us for all the technical errors. We're also trying to get used to this format of FNC. We're hoping to do more. If you have any suggestions for the way we conduct this, you can also write into us. We're also still sort of getting used to it. Okay. I think.
Yeah, and I apologize for the long-winded answers.
No, I think people really. I think it's only fair to answer in length. I mean.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thank you so
Rushil.
much. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.